But the winner or loser of this election, not going to be me. The winner or loser of this election is going to be you.
Everything that they've done, every person before us, all that sacrifice has come to this moment right now.
That we are going to win on November the 8th.
Welcome back to SMU-TV's Election Night coverage. I'm Malia Masamoto.
And I'm Brianna Flores. The numbers are coming in fast now. We're tracking the biggest races, and we have reporters stationed across Dallas at the biggest watch parties.
We'll also hear from one of the Hilltop's political experts with their take on the night. But first, let's get straight to the latest numbers coming in right now. The governor's race is the most talked about of the 7 statewide races. It's incumbent Greg Abbott and challenger Beto O'Rourke. Here's what we know right now. With 42% of counties reporting, Abbott has 56% of the vote. O'Rourke is lagging behind with 43% of the vote. The fight for lieutenant governor might get interesting. It's incumbent Republican Dan Patrick and Democrat Mike Collier. This one could get sticky because several high-profile Republicans are going for the Democrat in this one. Right now, it's Patrick with 54%. Collier is getting 43%.
Political newcomer Rochelle Garza is hoping to unseat 2-term incumbent Ken Paxton. She has an uphill fight through. Currently, Garza is behind by 10%. Paxton has 54% of the vote. There were more than 230 polling locations across Dallas today. Hughes Trigg Student Center here on campus was one of them. Now that the polls are closed, let's check in with SMU-TV's Jenny Howell with a look at how the day went. Jenny?
The polls are now closed, and that means things are winding down here at Hughes Trigg on SMU's campus. Over the last hour, we've seen lots of people coming in and out to place their vote for this year's midterm election. As people are finishing casting their votes for the day, we talked to a few more voters about how it went.
I obviously want to vote and exercise my civic duty, so I was looking online and saw that SMU Hughes Trigg Student Center had a voting location, and I was like, well, that would be pretty convenient since I'm here all day anyway. So decided to come down, and I got to school a little early before my class and went on down, and there was like pretty much no line. Like it was just a couple people down there, and it took like 10 minutes max.
So I voted because I think it's really important for everyone to vote. I think it's something that we all need to do. It's part of being an American. It's part of the democratic process.
For one, it's having the existential right to vote. I know a lot of places that don't have that right per se, and even my professors were kind of reminding us that whether you vote for Republican, Democrat, whatever party you go for, just having the ability to vote in itself is just a blessing in and of itself. So being able to take advantage of that right and being able to exercise it, why not? It takes no longer than 10 minutes out of your day.
Well, that's all we have for you guys tonight here at SMU's voting location at Hughes Trigg. But you can also check out our team's election night coverage online at smudailycampus.com and on social media with the hashtag SMUVotes2022. For SMU TV, I'm Jenny Howell.
Early voting turnout dropped statewide compared with the early voting turnout in the 2018 midterm elections. Unofficial voting totals by the Texas Secretary of State's office, which oversees Texas elections, indicate statewide voter turnout is about 31%, while 2018 results showed a 40% turnout. Early voting turnout numbers include mail-in and in-person ballots cast during the early voting period, which ended Friday. Turnout rates are based on the proportion of people who voted among all registered voters. Political experts say female voters could be a deciding factor in this election. That's in part because of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. SMU-TV's Isabella Duffy joins us with a closer look at how this might impact voters in Texas. Isabella, what did you learn?
When the High Court overturned Roe v. Wade, abortion rights became top of mind nationally and here on the Hilltop. We sat down with one of SMU political experts to talk about how this might play out in the polls.
After the Supreme Court overturned the landmark case that provided a constitutional right to abortion, 14 states banned most abortions, and many analysts turned their eyes to female voters, saying they're the ones that will decide this year's election.
I think that's the dominant media narrative, and I don't think that's quite correct.
We sat down with political science professor Ben Voth to get his take on the impact the High Court's decision could have on the election.
There are many women who would be motivated to vote to protect or restore Roe v. Wade and abortion rights. So there's a segment of the population like, I want to vote on that issue.
A poll by the nonprofit group Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation found the majority of Texas female voters support easing the state's abortion restrictions. Polling from the University of Texas at Tyler and the Dallas Morning News earlier this month would support Voth's mentality. That poll found despite Abbott's controversial ban on abortions after 6 weeks, 44% of female voters in the state still support Governor Greg Abbott, whereas 42% support Beto O'Rourke.
How abortion rights will play out in the national polls remain to be seen. For SMU-TV, I'm Isabella Duffy.
According to Forbes magazine, Goodwill is the 11th most inspiring company in the United States for the work they do in communities across North America.
I really believe in the power of nonprofit organizations to bring together different groups of people to create change around issues, and I believe that Goodwill is doing a great job of creating job opportunities and economic growth. It's a great model and it's creating a lot of change in the community.
We help in a lot of different aspects, for its work, clothing, things of that nature, to rehabilitate, to give back.
Goodwill is central to any given community here in 2015.
Goodwill is more than just a thrift store. Goodwill is a cause-driven, mission-driven organization that's about creating jobs and opportunities for people as a result of the purchases people make in the stores.
For more information or how to get involved, please visit www.goodwilldallas.org.
Welcome back. It is now time to hear from one of the Hilltop's political experts for their take on the night.
SMU-TV sat down with Dr. Colum Clark from the Bush Economic Institute to talk about inflation and how it has impacted economic growth. Reporter Tulsi Lohani has that story. Tulsi?
Thank you, Malia and Bree. Joining me here today is Mr. Colum Clark, who is the director of the Bush Institute and SMU Economic Growth Initiative. So welcome to the studio tonight.
Thanks so much, Tulsi. Good to be here.
Good, thank you. Thank you. So could you give us a quick elevator pitch? What is the Bush Institute SMU Economic Growth Initiative?
Well, I have the honor of being employed by both the George W. Bush Institute and SMU. At SMU, I'm an adjunct professor of economics, and at SMU, I lead our economic policy work. The two institutions have a partnership focused on bringing essentially policy-relevant economic research to the world, essentially trying to influence the influencers as we think of it, and we call that the George W. Bush Institute SMU Economic Growth Initiative.
Thank you so much. And so getting into the state of the economy as voters are looking at candidates and who to vote for, and perhaps even looking towards 2024, it's a big, scary number. What is the state of the national economy and its projected growth for the next fiscal year?
Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of data going into this election that the economy has been top of mind, and especially inflation. So, state of the economy. Well, first thing to say, I think, is that we have had a sort of an explosive increase in inflation over the last 2 years that really has kind of shocked a lot of people, and I think is top of mind for a lot of people. So the inflation rate was ticking along around 1.5–2% for years and years and years, and then suddenly, in a really short period of time, it shot up to over 9%. What does that mean? Basically, it means that comparing year over year, the overall price level of goods and services in the economy got to a point where it was 9% higher than the same time the previous year. That is a shockingly high rate, one of the highest actually in American history, although there have been moments when it was somewhat higher. So clearly people don't like that. In general, people's wages have not caught up, though they have gone up some, which means that after the rising cost of, milk and eggs and travel of all kinds and everything else, that people feel less well off than before. They don't like that. A lot of people also have fixed incomes that don't adjust very naturally for inflation. So then they're actually a lot poorer. They're certainly not happy. So that's been, a top of mind economic issue. And then I think the fast forward to today, what's actually happened, the Federal Reserve, which of course is America's central bank, essentially heavily influences, if not controls, the money supply over time, was a little late to respond. They do have as part of their legal mandate from Congress, a mandate for price stability, which has usually been taken to mean a little bit of inflation is okay, but not this high.
Yeah.
But a little bit belatedly, but over the course of this year, they have put through an unprecedentedly fast series of interest rate increases. And that's rippling through the economy right now in a lot of ways.
Yes, thank you so much for putting that national perspective. And so, as students are looking at economic issues, it's interesting to see, what's going on at home, whether it's here at SMU or back at home with their parents. So how should students and voters approach economic policy post this election?
Well, I think there's two sides to federal economic policy. There's what we call fiscal policy, and that's mostly what Congress and the president do. And then there is monetary policy, and that's what the Federal Reserve does. So we're not electing new governors for the board of the Federal Reserve System. We're just electing members of Congress as well as governors and so forth. Realistically, no matter how things turn out tonight, fiscal policy is not going to take any great big turns. Why do I say that? Republicans may or may not take the House of Representatives in Washington. They may or may not take the Senate. We'll see here over the next couple of hours. But even if they were to take both houses, they might wish to enact some changes in fiscal policy. For example, they might wish to cut spending for the next year, but President Biden will be in a position to veto that. Essentially, they can't pass a budget that the president hasn't also ultimately signed on to. So they'd have to compromise, and no doubt there'd be a lot of fireworks, and it'd be kind of unpleasant. But neither side will sort of get everything that it wants. So fiscal policy is likely to change only maybe in small incremental ways. Meanwhile, over at the Federal Reserve, the interest rate increases are likely to continue in every way. The leaders of the Federal Reserve have signaled that that will happen. And so what is now what we call the Fed funds rate, the official interest rate that the Fed controls, is at about 4%. They have indicated it will likely go to about 5% by early next year. That will continue to impact the economy. That will happen. So when you say what should students be thinking about, all of these things have real sort of kitchen table consequences for people. For example, the interest rates heavily influence such things as it influences the mortgage rate when someone goes to buy a home, which students before too many years have gone by, you just might be wishing to do that. They influence what you borrow at if you borrow to buy a car. They can flow through to student lending rates, although the government controls that, so that's a little bit of a, there's politics in that one. So all these interest rate increases are going to be felt by people. And as for what happens in Washington, well, if the Republicans take either house, then there will be what we oftentimes call gridlock. Nobody gets to actually do whatever they want, and we'll see how that works out.
Yes, well, thank you so much for giving us that national forecast and what to look forward to. Thank you so much again for joining us here tonight. I'm going to throw it back to Malia and Bree.
Thanks, Tulsi. Before we leave you, just one more election note. The Dallas County judge race has been called for incumbent Democrat Clay Jenkins. We'll be back one more time with one more on that race and more coverage over on the Hilltop.
You can also follow our team election coverage at SMUDailyCampus.com and on social media with the hashtag SMUVotes2022.
Thanks for watching, Mustangs. We'll be back soon.